I saved an Apache beauty, and she wouldn't let me leave. The sun was dropping behind the canyon when I noticed a shape near the rocks that didn't belong to the land. At first I thought it was a fallen animal, but as I moved closer I saw her, an Apache woman lying still, dust clinging to her skin, her breathing shallow but stubbornly alive. The desert had nearly claimed her. Her clothes were torn from travel and struggle, and there was dried blood at her temple. I hesitated, knowing how dangerous it could be for both of us. But leaving her there would have been a death sentence. I gave her water slowly, careful not to startle her, and when her eyes opened, they were sharp and full of fear, even in weakness. She tried to push herself away, but her body failed her. I lifted her onto my horse, feeling the tension in her frame, and rode back toward my cabin before night could fall. She didn't speak during the ride, but I could feel her watching me, memorizing every movement, every turn of the trail. At the cabin, I laid her near the fire and cleaned the wound on her head. She winced but didn't cry out. When I wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, her hand suddenly moved, revealing a small knife she had hidden. The blade trembled, not from weakness but from warning. I didn't reach for my gun. I stepped back instead and told her, as calmly as I could, that she was safe and that I meant her no harm. Trust didn't come easily in a land like this, and I could see she had learned that lesson well. Later, as the fire crackled and the wind pressed against the cabin walls, she finally slept, though lightly, as if ready to flee at the smallest sound. I sat across from her, keeping watch, wondering what had driven her into the canyon, alone and injured. Outside, coyotes called to one another, and the night felt heavier than usual. Before dawn, she woke again, sitting up quickly, knife still in her hand. Our eyes met in the low light. I told her she could leave whenever she wished, that I wouldn't stop her. She studied my face for a long moment, as if weighing truth against survival. Then slowly, she lowered the blade but did not put it away. She remained where she was, silent and alert, as if leaving was not yet an option. In that moment, I understood that saving her life was only the first step in a story neither of us had chosen, but both of us were now part of. Morning came quietly, filtered through the cracks of the cabin walls, but she was already awake. I could tell by the way her eyes followed me as I moved, sharp and aware, like someone who had learned to sleep only in pieces. I set food near the fire and stepped back, giving her space. She watched it for a long moment before eating, careful, cautious, as if every kindness carried a hidden cost. When she finally spoke, her voice was low but steady. She told me her name was Nayeli. The way she said it carried weight, as though names were not given lightly among her people. As the days passed, her strength returned faster than I expected. The wound healed, but the guard in her eyes never faded. I told her more than once that she was free to go, that I would take her anywhere she wished once she felt well enough. Each time she shook her head. There was something unfinished in her gaze, something that tied her to the cabin more strongly than fear. She began to help without being asked, repairing a broken latch, gathering firewood, cooking meals that tasted of unfamiliar herbs. It felt less like a guest staying and more like someone settling into a role she had already chosen. At night, she insisted on sitting near the door. When I asked why, she said simply that danger prefers darkness. I didn't argue. I had lived long enough on the frontier to know she was right. One evening, as the sky burned red with sunset, I saddled my horse and told her I would take her back to her people at first light. I thought relief would cross her face. Instead, her shoulders stiffened. She stepped in front of the horse and placed her hand on the reins, not in anger, but with quiet determination. "You saved my life," she said. "That is not a small thing." I told her I hadn't done it for debt or reward. I had done it because leaving her would have haunted me. She listened, then shook her head again. Among her people, she explained, life was not something taken and forgotten. It created a bond, a responsibility. Until that balance was restored, she could not walk away. Her words were calm, but there was steel beneath them. That night, as the fire burned low, I realized she wasn't staying because she had nowhere else to go. She was staying because she chose to, and the more I tried to convince her to leave, the clearer it became that whatever had followed her into the canyon had not let go yet. Whether I liked it or not, my life had crossed hers, and she had decided that leaving now would only invite danger later. The first sign that Nayeli had been right came just before noon, when the wind shifted and carried more than dust across the valley. She froze mid-step, her hand tightening around the bundle of herbs she was sorting. Her eyes lifted toward the ridge, sharp and focused, as if she were listening to something I couldn't hear. I followed her gaze, but saw only empty land and sunlight. Still, she moved with purpose, slipping a knife into her belt and checking the small bow she had repaired the night before. There was no panic in her actions, only readiness. Not long after, hoofbeats echoed faintly, then grew louder. 3 men appeared near the tree line, riding hard and scanning the ground. They didn't look lost. They looked like hunters, who believed the trail would lead them exactly where they wanted to go. I felt my hand drift toward my rifle, but Nayeli stopped me with a quiet gesture. She stepped forward, placing herself half a step ahead of me. Not as a shield, but as someone claiming the space. They spoke loudly, asking questions that were really demands, their eyes moving over the cabin, the horses, the land. One of them smiled in a way that carried no warmth. Nayeli answered them in a calm voice, words sharp and measured. I didn't understand her language, but I understood the tone. Whatever she said made them uneasy. Their hands hovered too close to their weapons, and I knew then they weren't here for trade or conversation. When they finally rode off, promising they would return, the quiet that followed felt heavier than the noise they had brought with them. Nayeli didn't relax. She moved into the trees, checking the ground, brushing her fingers over broken twigs and faint tracks. When she returned, her face was set with certainty. She told me the men were connected to those who had attacked her village, that they followed signs most people never noticed. The canyon had not been an accident. It had been an escape. That evening, as the sky darkened, she spoke more than she had since arriving. She told me about the night her village burned, about running until her legs failed, about hiding and surviving when others didn't. There was no self-pity. In her words, only truth. She said she had stayed because leaving too soon would bring danger to both of us. If she disappeared again, they would keep searching. If I sent her away, they would follow her trail right back to me someday. This is not just my fight, she said quietly. It reached you the moment you lifted me from the ground. I wanted to argue, to believe I could still step away, but I saw then the choice had already slipped from my hands. By saving her, I had stepped into a story larger than my own, and by staying, she had decided I wouldn't face what was coming alone. The attack came at dawn, just as the light began to spill over the hills. I woke to Nayeli's hand on my arm, her eyes alert, her body already poised for movement. There was no fear in her expression, only certainty. From the ridge above the cabin, shadows shifted where they shouldn't have, and the stillness of the morning felt wrong, stretched too tight. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We moved as if we had planned this together long before the night had ended. She took the higher ground, disappearing into the rocks with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the land as a living thing. I stayed near the cabin, rifle ready, heart steady in a way that surprised me. When the first shot rang out, it wasn't reckless. It was a warning. The men hesitated, just long enough for Nayeli to make herself known. Her presence was sudden and commanding, her voice cutting through the air with words I didn't understand but felt in my bones. They hadn't expected resistance. They hadn't expected her. The standoff didn't last long. Whether it was her resolve or the knowledge that the land itself seemed to stand against them, they retreated, leaving behind only dust and broken silence. When it was over, Nayeli returned slowly, scanning every direction before allowing herself to breathe. There was a thin cut on her arm, nothing serious, but the sight of it tightened something in my chest. I realized then how deeply this fight had bound us, not through force but through shared resolve. Later, as the day settled and the danger faded into memory, I packed my things. Old habits die hard, and I had always believed that moving on was the safest answer. Nayeli watched without speaking. When I reached for my saddle, she stepped forward and closed the distance between us. Her gaze was steady, not pleading, not demanding. "You still think leaving will end this?" she said. I didn't answer because she was right. Saving her had changed the course of my life, and trying to walk away now felt like denying a truth I could no longer ignore. She told me that among her people, some paths are chosen for you, and others reveal themselves only after you act. This one, she said, had revealed itself the moment I refused to let her die. I set my bags down. The sound felt final, heavier than any promise. Nayeli nodded once, a small smile touching her lips for the first time. It wasn't gratitude, it was understanding. And as the sun climbed higher, I knew I wasn't being held there against my will. I was staying because somewhere between saving her and standing beside her, leaving was no longer who I was.